The rise of Sumerian city-states. How did geographic challenges lead to the rise of city-states in Mesopotamia? Introduction. Early people who lived in the Fertile Crescent began farming and living in small villages. But over time, small Neolithic villages grew into large, complex cities. These villages were located in a land of rolling hills and low plains called Mesopotamia. In modern-day Iraq, Mesopotamia is a Greek word that means the land between the rivers. The two main rivers of the Fertile Crescent are the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. Cities first appeared in the southern region of this land, with the earliest dating back to about 3500 BCE. These were similar to small independent countries. Each had their own ruler, as well as their own farmland to provide food. Suppose that you were visiting one of these early cities. You would see a walled settlement surrounded by farmland used to supply food for the city, as well as strong city walls constructed with sun-baked bricks. Moats or ditches filled with water would surround these walls and help keep out enemies. During an attack, people living outside the city walls would flee inside for protection. As you gazed at the city, you might wonder how it came to be built. Why didn't people in Mesopotamia go on living in small villages as their ancestors had done for thousands of years? Why did large city-states thrive in the land between the rivers? In this lesson, you'll learn the answers to these questions. And there's a picture of one of the city-states that they have found in modern-day Iraq, where Iraq is today. Section 1, Mesopotamia. A difficult environment. It was not easy to live in the part of the Fertile Crescent called Mesopotamia. The northern part was hilly and received rain. The southern part had low plains or flat land. The sun beat down fiercely on the plains between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. There was little rain. The Mesopotamians were farmers, and their farms needed water. The rivers overflowed onto the plains during flood season, but for most of the year the soil was hard and dry. On the plains, building materials were difficult to find. There were plenty of reeds, which are weeds that grow near rivers, but there were few trees to provide wood, and even stones were scarce, which means they didn't have a lot of stones. And there were few natural barriers to keep out enemies. Mesopotamians faced four major problems as they attempted to survive this environment. 1, food shortages in the hills. 2, an uncontrolled water supply in the plains. 3, difficulties in building and maintaining systems that provided water across village boundaries. And the last one, attacks by neighboring communities. So right here are the four problems that Sumerians faced, or Mesopotamians. Over time, Mesopotamians found solutions to these four problems. Let's explore how their solutions led to the building of some of the world's first cities. So in this map, the title is Mesopotamia, around 2500 BCE. And this green area on the key, this is the Fertile Crescent. This is where they decided to live, basically because of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates River. The land was soil, or fertile with good soil, like we've talked about. Here is Sumer, one of the first civilizations that we'll be talking about. And it's this little yellow area right here, again, by the rivers. Neolithic farming community. So here are two Neolithic, the New Stone Age, and right here, Catalhoic and Jarmo. These were two Neolithic communities. And the Sumerian city-states, these are right here where these little dots are in Sumer. So, food shortages in the hills. In Neolithic times, people in some areas of the world began farming. One of the areas that had good conditions for growing crops was the rolling foothills of the Zagros Mountains in northern Mesopotamia. Mild weather and plentiful rains made the foothills a good place to farm. The nearby wooded hills provided timber for building shelters and plenty of stones for toolmaking. Over several thousand years, these good conditions allowed the number of people in Mesopotamia to grow dramatically. Then problems arose. Some historians believe that by 5000 BCE, Farmers in the Zagros foothills did not have enough land to grow food for the increasing population. So they were running out of food because more and more people were beginning to live there. As a result, villages began to suffer from food shortages. Below the foothills and to the south, the Euphrates and Tigris rivers ran through flat plains. The plains covered a large area of land and few people lived there. During most of the year, the land was very hard and dry, and the plains lacked trees and stones for making shelters and tools. Yet the plains still had promise. In the spring, both of the rivers flooded, bringing precious water to the land. Perhaps farms could be successful there. Driven by the need to grow food, people moved out of the foothills and onto the plains. This region became known as Sumer, and its people, the Sumerians. So here they are on the plains, and if we go back up to the map, here's where they moved, which became known as Sumer. So in that situation, the problem was they did not have enough food for all of the people. So in each section, you'll realize that there was a problem, and they had to find a solution to what the problem was, or to how they could fix the problem. An uncontrolled water supply in the river valley. The farmers who moved to Sumer faced many challenges. One of the biggest problems was the uncontrolled water supply. During the spring, rain and melted snow from the mountains flowed into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, causing them to flood across the plains. Unfortunately, no one could be sure exactly when the floods would come. If it happened after farmers planted their crops, the young seedlings would be washed away. For much of the rest of the year, Sumer's unbaked soil was dry and hard as stone. Hot, strong winds blew thick layers of dust across the ground. Faced with such dramatic seasonal changes, farmers were constantly struggling to raise crops with either too little or too much water. In order to grow food, they needed a way to control the water so they could have a reliable water supply throughout the entire year. Therefore, Sumerian farmers began creating irrigation systems for their fields. They built levees along the sides of the river to prevent flooding. When the land was dry, the farmers poked holes in the levees, allowing the water to flow through the holes and into the thirsty fields. Over time, the Sumerians learned other ways to control the supply of water. They dug canals to shape the paths the water flowed. They also constructed dams along the river to block the water and force it to collect in pools they had built so that they could store the water for later use. And the last one we'll read today, building and maintaining a complex irrigation system. So remember, irrigation system is how we water our grass, our plants, our trees. We might use a sprinkler today or a hose, but the Sumerians had to figure out, especially if they're living in a dry area, how they were going to get the water to their fields, and then also how were they going to take care of it. So it says here, irrigation systems provided enough water for Sumerian farmers to grow plenty of food. But a new problem arose, how to maintain the irrigation system across village boundaries. The irrigation system passed through a number of villages as it carried water from the river to the fields. The system needed constant care and repair. Canals became clogged with silt, so farmers had to clean them regularly. One clogged canal could disrupt the entire system. Silt would be, sort of imagine mud, and the water wouldn't be able to get through it. So if you have a sprinkler at home, you might notice that sometimes it's clogged, or maybe somebody might have to come and fix it. Same thing for the Sumerians. Some villages were connected for miles around by these canals. Farmers could no longer live apart or in small groups. They had to work together for the common good. So just like we have to, sometimes we have to figure out together a solution to a problem or how we can solve it together. Gradually, villages came to depend on one another to build and maintain this complex irrigation system. People who lived in different villages may have worked together to clear the silt from the canals to keep them open. Workers may have scooped water from one reservoir into another to ensure that water levels were balanced. So a reservoir would be like this big place where they keep the water. So they might take it from that storage place where they're keeping the water and putting it into another place. As the Sumerians worked together, they began to create larger communities. Between 3500 and 3000 BCE, villages grew into towns. Some towns in Sumer became cities with populations as large as several thousand people. And here's an example of their irrigation system and then the green fields as a result of that. All right, that's where we'll stop for today.